Hello and welcome to Brokenomics. Now, in this episode, we're going to be continuing to talk about fiat currencies failing as they do. However, there are some pretty good examples of places where they have already failed, and a prime example of that is going to be Argentina. Now, for this, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Ariel Aguilar. Hello, Ariel.
Hey,
Thank you for
Dan.
coming on.
Nice to meet you.
Did I get the pronunciation vaguely right?
Yeah, Ariel Aguilar. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
And you are from Argentina.
that's right.
So you are well qualified to speak about currency collapses and so on.
Yeah, I've lived a few during my life, so I'm experienced.
Right. Were there any before your life as well? I mean, Argentina is quite good at this.
Yeah, it's already destroyed 5 different currencies and taken out 13 zeros out of all those
13 zeros.
Yeah. So it's a completely, I say, perpetual monetary disaster.
Right. Okay.
Ever since it was created.
Wow. That is that's quite impressive, actually, isn't it? Yes, as it goes. So tell us about yourself then. What's your journey? How did you wind up
Well,
there?
actually, I'm doing a tour of Europe. We have a Bitcoin van. It's a truck, like a sprinter van. We are touring all of Europe. We started in Spain.
Yes.
We went all the way to Oslo, all the way to Istanbul in Turkey, Gibraltar, Portugal. So all around Europe. And now we are in the UK. And the idea is to teach people about Bitcoin. And so we also teach them why Bitcoin and not crypto. It's a very interesting journey. Yeah.
Yes, I can well imagine, coming from Argentina, why you might be attracted to that. I mean, I think everybody should be, but the nature of it probably has to start in those countries where they've got the most pronounced failure.
Yeah, actually, the Bitcoin community in Argentina started quite early on. Like there were some Bitcoiners from 2012 who started organizing meetups back then. And by 2013, we had regular meetups, and the group got bigger and bigger. And then that group of people organized into a Bitcoin Foundation, so Bitcoin Argentina NGO. Then they also did a Bitcoin conference, the first Latin American Bitcoin conference that is still running to this day. And then they did this that I'm traveling in, which is La Bitcoineta, which is this van. And they also did a Bitcoin building, a co-working space, since 2014.
Ah, wow. Okay.
So they rented a whole building in downtown Buenos Aires, and that building is still there. It's like 800 to 1,000 square meters of offices and common areas, plus a terrace. So the Bitcoin community is quite...
So I think countries like Argentina and El Salvador certainly are benefiting from this right now, although I think it is only really a matter of time before Western countries, the UK, the US, are going to have to look at currencies which are backed by something a little bit firmer than the promises of politicians. And I like gold and Bitcoin. But...
Sure. I mean, before Bitcoin, I was a gold bag and silver bag. Then I went on to Bitcoin. We were doing a libertarian party. And one of the party members became a Bitcoiner quite early on. And he came to the party and proposed, why don't we accept donations in Bitcoin? And so we started. There was an Argentine in Singapore sending money over to Argentina. And this member would take the Bitcoin for himself and give the party pesos.
Good deal for him.
Yeah.
Very good deal for him.
Yeah. If the party had kept the pesos, we could have made a tremendous political campaign in 2013. But no, we had the pesos, sadly. So
right, smart guy.
So what I'm noticing here through these travels is that Europe somehow is waking up in the same sense as Argentina did in 2013. So it is like a 10-year difference. And my take on this is because you've started to feel inflation since 2020. Right? Because of COVID, mostly.
We've started to feel it very strongly after 2020. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when inflation is like 3, 4, 5%, people just let it go.
Yeah.
But it's much higher than what the governments say. I mean, the governments will say it's 8, 10%. But also during these travels, I've been asking the people, how much was inflation since 2020? And the answers range between 25 to 50 to doubling.
Yeah, there are some good ways that you can measure it over periods of time. I mean, one of the ways I quite like is the Big Mac index. And if you look at that, you would actually say that between 2008 and 2020, the rate of inflation in Western countries was around 4%, which is double the official rate of well, they said they were going to cap it at 2%, and they sort of had some number and everything. But really, the rate of inflation was 4%. And nobody really, well, you did notice it, but you had to look back over a decade or more to see the difference. It's like, oh yeah, I've got a pay rise, my house has gone up, my shopping bill has gone up. But it's really over a 10-year period that you strongly notice it. But since 2020, it's, a year is like a decade in inflation terms now.
Yeah, I also use the same index, like the hamburger from McDonald's, or the other day I went into a Burger King just to check what was the cheapest hamburger, and it was £4.
Yes,
£4. In Argentina during the 90s, we had, later we're going to talk about this, but we had 10 years of stability, and a hamburger was like $1. So to think that now it is £4 for a hamburger, just the cheapest cheeseburger, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about a Whopper or anything like that.
Yeah. Nothing fancy like that.
Exactly. No. It blows my mind. It's like for some people, they might be also like be left out of eating at the supposedly cheapest places, which is like a McDonald's or Burger King, right? At one moment, that was like the cheapest food people could get, and now it's getting more expensive. And
so there's going to be this process of waking up as people are exposed to the realities of this in a way that your country has been many, many times at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't actually know that much about Argentina. Can you maybe start with like a brief overview of historical perspective around Argentina?
Sure. I mean, Argentina's history is fascinating because it's a country which its name comes from actually silver. So it's always been the Spanish conquistadores that were living in Spain. They were looking for either gold or silver, right? Gold in North America, silver in the South. And they told tales, like myths, of finding a place full of silver.
Okay.
So Argentina means the land of silver.
Huh.
And actually, the silver wasn't there, it was in Potosí. It was in Bolivia, right?
Right.
And they navigated through a river that is next to Buenos Aires, which divides Argentina from Uruguay. And they also call the river Rio de la Plata, River of Silver. So yeah, they were fascinated.
Am I right in thinking the chemical symbol for silver is AR or something? So
yeah, it's Argentum. So yeah, Argentina comes from Argentum.
So it literally means land of silver?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. That's interesting.
So yeah, the name of the country and the River of Silver. Well, like I said, eventually the silver was not in Buenos Aires, it was in Potosí, but the name kept, so it stayed. And at first the country was really savage. There were Indians, it was anarchy, chaotic, right? We declared independence, but we still were fighting each other. The fight was about how decentralized Argentina needed to be, like unitarian or federalist, right? And there were a group of men that were very classical liberal, who had studied Adam Smith, John Locke, Hume, and they wanted to bring those ideas just as the same as the United States to make Argentina a country of freedom.
So literally, their vision was a libertarian country.
Yeah, classical liberal, yeah.
Okay.
And they were called the generation of 37 because of the year 37. Some of them had to exile.
1837 this was.
Some of them had to exile out of the country because this war between Unitarians and Federalists, they were going to get killed. But those ideas remained. They drafted the Constitution. And the Constitution is one of the most, let's say, libertarian ones in the world, because it recognized the right to property.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the U.S. Constitution does not have that amendment, right? It doesn't say anything. It says right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but it doesn't say property.
It doesn't say property rights,
right?
Well, that is the foundation of any market economy, is property rights. So, yeah, that's quite an oversight, actually.
Exactly. So, on one side we had that, And on the other side, it also said that any foreigner would have the same rights as citizens. So whoever stepped his feet on Argentina would have property rights. So that was like a calling for all Europeans, come over to Argentina, you're going to be a citizen.
Yes. So that sort of idea has a different context today, but in the time it would have been, like you say, a call to Northern Europeans to transition over.
Yeah, it would be like a radical idea for some, right? And yeah, so Argentina started, organizing. The constitution was drafted and established in 1853. By 1860, the main province joined, so the country became much established, and it started growing little by little. By 1880, it was already on a upward path. And then also the British started investing heavily in Argentina. You, for example, created all the rail lines, the railways, right?
Oh, that sounds like the sort of thing we would have done back then. Yes.
Of course, the telegraph, the meat packers.
Yes.
The country by then, around 1820, 1830, had more cows than people, because the cows were roaming free. They could not contain them, so they were reproducing in the wild, right? And for a Argentine cowboy, we call them gauchos. He was like, if he needed to eat, he would just kill a cow, like take the tongue out, right? Cook the tongue, eat, and go about his way. He wouldn't. There was such an abundance of cows that he didn't mind, right?
That's a bit wasteful.
Yeah,
but all the same, every meal being steak is unfathomably based.
Yeah.
Yes.
So well, then the country started growing. A lot of immigration by the hundreds of thousands of people each year started coming, and the country was classical liberal, low taxes. Now we're gonna talk about the money. I mean, at first the money was like a monetary freedom, that you had coins from the provinces, coins from Spain, coins from Potosí.
So basically, it was a free money standard that anybody could choose which money they chose to accept.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whenever that has been tried, people always default to gold and silver.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of the weights and the purities.
Yeah. The most used was the Real de Ocho, which means it was a Spanish coin minted in Potosí, Bolivia. Yeah, from the silver mines.
Okay, so that would have been, yes. Yeah, that would have been your day-to-day transaction, would have been a small coin of silver of yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they cut it in like either halves, fourth, or 8 pieces, like a pizza, because it was a big coin, right?
Yeah, literally a quarter. I mean, the Americans still refer to quarters, but at one time it would have been a recognized coinage. You just literally chop into halves and then quarters.
Right. Because actually that Real de Ocho became the base for the dollar. I learned this quite recently. I went to the British Museum, and in the gold room, there's a guy that will let you touch the coins at around 11, right? And yeah, he gave me one from Potosí. And he told me that these coins went all the way up to North America, to the United States. And there they would restamp it as dollar. So that coin was the base for the US dollar.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, well, that was monetary freedom, but by 1881, we had the first national currency, right? And that currency had gold backing for a few years, and then whenever there was a crisis, they would take out it's a typical history.
Yes.
The thing happened with the pound.
Yes.
If you go to the Bank of England museum, you will see that for some years you have gold backing. Whenever there's a crisis,
and when it becomes inconvenient, we get rid of the gold backing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Argentina was the same in that sense.
Yes.
And it had been inflating. So at first the parity was 1-to-1 with the content value of the gold. it went to 3-1, 4-1. And that currency is the one that lasted the longest in Argentina. It lasted almost 90 years. That for Argentine standards is...
Well, actually, for any currency, I think the average for all currencies is something like 57 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So for any currency to get up to 90 years, that isn't bad.
Yeah. But sadly, Argentina started to little by little leave its classical liberal values. At around 1900 or 1910, it was one of the top 7 superpowers in the world. It was one of the biggest economies. It was almost on par with Canada and Australia, right? And they introduced, voting for everyone. At first, voting wasn't available to all the foreigners. And then,
yeah, this sounds like a bad decision.
Yeah, because these people, sadly, it's a sad history. They brought over other kind of ideas. They brought socialist, communist, anarchist ideas, right? And they got representation in the Congress, and so they started. They brought the European ideas, right? That was popular at the First World War, Second World War. By 1930, we started with the military coups. So we had democracy or regular governments until 1930. So it was a succession of military governments that one branch of the military would attack another branch of the military, right, and impose a new general. And there was one general that had studied in Europe and was fascinated with Mussolini and Hitler.
Right. Okay.
And that was Juan Domingo Peron, which became, let's say, the icon of Argentine presidents. So Peron came back to Argentina with those after seeing Mussolini, and he got into power by a military coup.
Yes.
But he had previously been a minister of labor. So he got the idea of being popular with the unions and being popular with the workers. Okay. So he was a little bit different from the other military. And his wife, or his girlfriend at first, was a poor girl that had come from the inner lands of Argentina.
Okay.
And
well, let's not judge. She might be of fine moral standing. What happened to her?
Well, I mean, this is one of the versions of how they tell the story. You can see this in the musical Evita. Sometimes it's played on...
That was her, was it? Evita, yes.
Yeah, it was played here in London, or there's a movie with Madonna about it.
Yes, I remember when that came out.
The way they tell the story is he was a poor girl that had a father that would not recognize her because she was a bastard child from a different family. So the father had a real family, and like the mother was, I know.
That sounds exactly like the sort of story that Hollywood would tell. What's the other interpretation of her rise?
Oh, that she was like a little poor girl, and she went to Buenos Aires.
Okay.
And somehow she met Peron, right?
Yeah, somehow. Yeah.
But so the story they tell is that she was already very young, sleeping with old men.
Right.
And she decided to go to Buenos Aires when she was really young.
Yes.
And she climbed up the ladder up until she met the president.
One gentleman of the time.
Exactly.
I can imagine why that was left out of the Hollywood version. Yes.
Yeah. So
it's a bit like Camilla Harris, isn't it? Only yes.
Yeah.
Well, I best stop there. But
so then the military saw that he was getting too much power, and they decided to do a military coup on him, put him in prison. And at one moment he wanted to retire and cancel everything, but Evita, the wife, convinced him, no, you have to be a president. Let's call for elections. You run as president, we win, right? And we Peronize the country. And so she went while he was on prison. She went on the radio preaching his case, right, and arguing for him. So they released him, and he won. And
she was the campaign front.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. And after that, Argentina has been, when you look at all the graphs from all the metrics, like from, I don't know if it was 1946 or 48. It's been like this.
So for some reason, the Hitler supporting general and the slapper were not good for the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Shocker.
Like their agenda was to nationalize all the railroads, nationalize the central bank, nationalize all the telecommunications.
Well, fine if you have to nationalize the railways, but if you nationalize the central bank, I mean, you are just if you have a central bank to begin with.
It was the central bank was established 1935, so quite late. So the gold standard was finished by then.
Yes.
So 11 years later or 10 years later, they nationalized it. It was around time when you nationalized the Bank of London, England. Yeah. It also happened around the same time.
I mean, that's basically when it was game over for freedom, in my view. Is when the run of central banks that you got in the early part of the 19th century. The sort of 1913s and to 1930s, that whole period. I mean, I think that's really when the globalist coup happened.
Right.
And everything since then has been a tidying up exercise.
There's also an expression that was told that said that when Peron came to the central bank, you could not walk in the aisles because of all the gold.
Oh, the whole thing was stuffed with gold. Yeah,
stuffed with gold, and by the end,
I wonder what happened to that. Yeah. I'm sure you'll tell us.
All this, all gone, right? All disappear, sadly, because they were nationalizing companies, so expropriating the companies. Whoever wasn't aligned with the government was an enemy. Evita established manzaneras. Manzana is apple, but it also means block, like a town block in Spanish. So it was like a woman in charge of the entire block, of spying all the neighbors to see which neighbor is aligned or is a Peronist and which neighbor is not. Like you had to have a picture of Peron and Evita on your wall, in your house, in your business, in your school. My father was a young boy, around 6 years old or younger. And they had to sing the Peronist anthem.
Wow, this is really Soviet.
Yeah.
Every house, every workplace, a picture of Peron and Evita.
Exactly. Right. And the textbooks for first grade, when they teach you to read and write, would say, I love Evita, Evita loves me, right? I love Peron, Peron loves me. So
fairly unsubtle on the propaganda, but did it work? Did people love them?
Well, I mean, up till this day, Peronism, Argentina cannot get rid of it. And it's become something that it's really hard to explain, because Peron at one moment was like a fascist Nazist. Then he did some socialist things. But
has he taken on this sort of myth-like status of like a Washington or a Churchill or an Ataturk, somebody like that?
Exactly. Okay. Or a Che Guevara, right? So it has a myth status in Argentina. And in 1955, he was ousted by a military coup. Those militaries were sort of classical liberal. So then we went back into a succession of...
a series of military coups.
Yeah, exactly.
And your father was a young man while all this was happening and remembers it. Okay.
So we started having inflation. By 1970, the first currency had to die. I do not have it here. I do have the next one. I'm going to show you.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah. I have the second one was called peso ley, peso law. And they took 2 zeros. So this was the first taking out of 2 zeros.
So the first currency, for every 100 of them, you would get one of these.
Exactly.
One of these new ones.
Which is this one, right?
Okay.
Peso ley. So this would have been 10 of the previous one, right?
Yeah. Well, you've got 1,000 there, haven't you? So that would have been
10 of the previous one.
Yeah, 100,000 of the.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
100,000. You're right.
100,000
Exactly.
of the previous ones.
So
presumably that's later on in its life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because this one lasted 13 years, and
okay, 13, still not that bad. I mean,
we
it's
went
not
from
good.
90 to 13. So we're getting worse.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go worse.
Yeah, I bet.
This one died around the time of the Falkland Wars, right, in 83.
Right.
Most likely, they spent it all on the war. So then this one got to a 1 million peso bill, right? So
and how much would a 1 million peso bill buy you? A house?
No. Like let's say $100 today, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It would have bought you a good suit, basically. Yeah. The 1 million pesos.
Yeah. So then they took out 4 zeros, right?
Right. Okay.
So we need.
So we're up to 6 zeros so far taken out. Okay.
10,000 of this one became one of these.
Okay.
So the million became 10,000. No, 100.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Right?
Yes, and 1,000 became the 1.
Exactly.
Yes.
So now this was called peso argentino. So it was very similar to this one, right? But now it was an Argentine peso, right? It was.
Yeah, they look basically. They got the same aesthetic. It's just one's a bit slightly more colourful. You could easily confuse one for the other.
Yeah, but they are different. Different series.
Yes.
That one is called peso ley because of the law that established it.
Yep.
Right. Here they try to be patriotic and they put peso argentino.
Right.
This one lasted the shortest. This was the worst of all because they destroyed this in 2 years.
2 years.
2 years, right? From 83 to 85.
That is quite impressive, actually, when it comes to currency destruction.
Because back after that war, the military lost all the popularity and all the relevance.
So do you agree with the narrative that the Falklands War was an effort to a desperate gamble to prop up their popularity?
Yes, exactly. It was an attempt to gain popularity and respect on the population.
Yeah.
To have a common enemy. Right.
It's the standard thing they do, isn't it? If your population turns against you, you find an external enemy. But it was just rather unfortunate they picked Maggie.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work. And as I was saying to you off air earlier, I think if Argentina had sent, instead of 10,000 conscripts, if they'd sent 100 single women today, the Falklands would be an Argentinian island because they would have all gone out there. They all would have had
the Argentine
kids.
Women are beautiful, so
yeah. And then 20 years later, you would have a whole youth movement saying we want to be Argentinian. Right. But yeah, they didn't send 100 single women, so
But it
lost.
would be very poor for the Falklanders because
yes.
Right now they have like a GDP per capita, one of the highest in the world.
Oh, do they? Right.
Yeah, you have to check that out, the number. And Argentinians right now are making like, 6,000, 8,000 a year on average. So yeah.
Oh, maybe I should get somebody on from the Falklands then.
Yeah.
Yes, that'll be a good future episode. So they lost the war. Did they get couped out as well?
No, they did a return to democracy. So we had elections again.
Okay.
These election terms lasted 6 years, but a left-leaning candidate came into power, which was terrible in economics. It was.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
Left-wing about it.
It was a disaster. And so he proposed a new currency.
Yeah.
Which is about when I was born, 85, which was called the Austral, right? The Austral. So the peso got replaced by the Austral plan.
And how many of the old ones became one of those?
3 zeros.
3 zeros. Okay, so 1,000 goes down to 1 again.
Exactly.
Blimey,
so this one at first, when it was born, it was worth more than $1. 83 cents of an Austral bought you $1.
Okay.
So they started to inflate it.
So when did this one come in?
85.
85. Okay.
85. So by 89, we were having hyperinflation of these.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.